everybody. Welcome to another episode of Illustration Masterclass. Today we are looking at Marc Silvestri, and I'm just going to go over a couple of pieces with him today. I just got a couple of Spawn pieces. I've been looking at a lot of ink stuff because I've been trying to dig into doing more ink-related work, and I really dig the old school vibe of like a good Marc Silvestri piece or a Greg Capullo. And my favorite comic growing up was always Spawn. I just really dug the visual elements that these artists put into their work. Just how detailed and how how graphic it was at the same time. So I'm gonna go ahead and we're gonna jump into this first one here. This looks like this was a cover for Medieval Spawn Witchblade crossover, something like that. Yeah, so the first thing it is that I notice with these covers is there is always there's always a strong focal point, right? And this strong focal point is always kind of kept in this kind of a loop of these different elements. And I think you could see that there's a clear interaction between these different elements that kind of swoop like this. It's almost like it creates a kind of a convergence of a circle, something here, right? I think that this is definitely very deliberate on the part of Marc, right? If he had the horse looking off this way, or he had the hooves pointing out this way, then it might not be as dynamic. But he keeps the image focused on where it is that he wants you to look, which is this focal point, which is really the contrast between Medieval Spawn and then this character here in the front. And they contrast against each other in a couple of different ways. He separates the foreground and the background by putting the character that's in the foreground, putting her in a lighter rendering style than Spawn on his horse. So Spawn has way more detail, obviously, on his cloak, but also just in the dark shapes that he's pushing, right? And you can see that a lot of these different lines are kind of incidentally pointing to either one of them, right? Like you could say that these lines are pointing up, right? Meanwhile, you could say that these lines are, in a sense, they're pointing down at her, right? He does a really good job of creating these nice, big, dark shapes here, and then blending them out with these lines. And notice that they all move in the same direction. Right? And this is crucial that you have a style where it is that you can have these big blocky shapes, but you can also bridge these big blocky shapes with more cross-hatching in between the two, right? So you have like these crosshairs that are going across here, and this helps push it back a little bit because you don't want everything to just be either a black shape or a white shape. It will start to feel like it has no depth to it, you know. Like if we imagined that this whole shape up here would be completely black, if you completely made this cape black, it really wouldn't be interesting to look at, and it would probably conflict with the attention to detail that he's putting in the hair here, right? And notice that the hair itself, what is it doing? It's flicking back in one of two directions. It's either flicking back this way, which is pointing us back to Spawn, or it's flicking the other way. Please excuse my laptop as it tries to catch up. So it's going back this way, or it's going this way. One or the other. It's not really going straight out. You know, you're not getting this kind of effect. So the hair has a general direction. And you could say that this cape as well is a general direction that's pointing down. Right? It's like it's converging. The different parts of the different parts of the drawing are all converging on this central point. You know, even the lines that are going away from it, you could really say that they're going towards it. All right. So let's go ahead and let's jump on to the next one. This was one of my favorite Spawn covers, and I always knew that it. I never knew it was drawn by Marc. Um, I always thought it was drawn by Greg Capullo. But searching around online, I come to find out it was actually Marc Silvestri. You can see his little icon down here. So let me close out this other one. All right, so there's a lot of different things that we could point to here. Again, we have a similar situation where he has the environment. The environment is always in support of the focal point, right? He positions the character and the environment in a way that it's always supporting where the character is positioned in the environment, right? So we look at, for example, these buildings and whatnot. You know, we could imagine another scenario where we're looking down on him on top of this, what it looks like he's on top of a chimney. And if we were to do like a completely top-down, you know, almost helicopter-like view of him, it would seem very flat. It would not be very readable because the image would have no silhouette to it and it would have no direction to it. So picking the camera angle is really crucial when it comes to doing a good composition. And you can see here that he is positioning the camera underneath, which gives it this very dramatic kind of angle to Spawn. You know, whenever we're looking up at something, we tend to think of them as being very powerful. And then, of course, he's got this great pose, the classic Spawn pose of him kind of hiding his face behind his arm, looking out menacingly from behind his cape. But all the lines in this environment, they lead us directly to it, while at the same time, you know, he's able to use these very dark shapes in the foreground to separate the foreground from the background, right? So you have different foreground elements here. He's dropped these completely into black. And there's a very stark contrast between these black and these white shapes, right? And that's the same thing as it goes here. So you have these, and then here we have this. We have these lines. Now these lines here in the foreground, they're all helping to point up, but he's also using these lines as well to support the same idea. They're all pointing upwards. Right? They're all converging, in other words. They're converging up to what we imagine is the horizon line, which intersects with Spawn. Right? So if I was to put the horizon line there and then I was to draw these lines out, it's probably somewhere close around there. So we get closer to the image, and as we get closer to the image, I know it's a little bit blurred, but for the sake of this, we'll just roll with it. Notice how all the lines and everything kind of take us here, right? We have this kind of zigzag line that's coming here. We have this one as well. All the lines on his coat, they're all kind of fanning out from here. Right? They're all kind of fanning outwards. And we also see different elements of contrast as well. You know, these lines, they're all pointing us up here, right? And we see the contrast between his head having a lot of detail with this kind of black background that's framing it. His well as this white background. So there's this contrast between detail and a lack of detail that also helps draw our attention towards it. And again, you could also say that this little sliver of smoke that converges through the drawing is also the same thing. Notice that it takes us through where our focal point is, right? That's another way to lead the eye around. It's taking these different elements of the environment, having them intersect in non-obvious ways with the focal point itself, right? And then we have this visual interest elements of the bats in the background. Notice that they really don't go onto the left side of the page, except for in the back here. So he's using this left side, this bottom left side, he's using this to create depth by showing something far off in the distance. You know, it might be confusing to the eye if you put another big one here, right? Maybe not, probably not actually. But regardless, he's organizing the page to where this side has a lot of detail and has a lot of background elements, whereas this part has the foreground, and then we have the focal point here. I think I've got one more. We'll just kind of quickly go over it. Yeah, this is a really cool Silvestri one. I'm not 100% sure what this is, what this is from. It feels very Frazetta-esque. But again, you know, we have different elements of the drawing that all kind of intersect with our focal point, and that all kind of take our eye to our focal point, right? And then you can say this is like a leading line. You could say his spine is like a leading line that takes you up. And then, of course, notice that all of these characters are all generally facing in her direction, right? And there's this kind of border that's drawn around her. Same thing with this. This is pointing at him. This is coming down, right? So there's lots of different ways it is that you can use the environment and the other elements in the environment to subtly point at where it is that you want the character to look. And that's by using things like converging lines, you know, like with objects such as this piece of land here that disappears behind the woman and the tiger here. It converges because it's implied that it's going up and over here, right? And so it's intersecting with the body itself, and this helps create depth because you're creating overlay, and you see a lot of elements of overlay in this image with the characters in the background and here in this mid-ground element and whatnot. Again, it's all about organizing things and having things point in all in one direction. You know, you could see how if all these different elements, if you took them and you pointed them in random directions, even though each individual one is very subtle, and you could make an argument that, well, you know, these guys on the right, you know, who cares if they're looking to the left or they're looking to the right? Who cares if his weapon is pointed this way or if it's pointed that way? You know, on an individual basis, you might be able to make that argument, but together, if you were to take all these different elements and point them in different directions, you would more than likely be very confused as to where it is that your eye is supposed to look, and it would not create a level of visual interest that he's able to create with the way that he organizes all these different shapes. Right? Okay, so that's it for today. Just a quick announcement for those that are new to the channel. I do these every Wednesday. I'm also doing podcasts as well, interviewing different artists and whatnot that you can find on this channel. I may be taking a little bit of a break from doing the podcasts, but I've got other videos, stuff cooking. I've got the rest of my Minority Report analysis videos coming out here pretty soon. So if you want to learn more about storytelling and that sort of thing, You want to make sure to check out the Blade Runner and Minority Report videos here. Those will all help you if you're a comic artist or you're a writer or whatever. These will help you understand how to communicate through story, which is what this channel is about. It's about visual storytelling. It's about storytelling in general and creating things. So anyway, guys, thank you for watching, and hope you guys enjoyed this and got something from it. Take care.